With One Piece being such a vast and long story, there are many Mandela effect moments that cause people to believe things about the story that aren't necessarily true. This video won't be going over hot takes, but things that people believe that are just incorrect from the story standpoint. Like always, I know we're going to be disagreeing heavily on some of these points, so I'm ready for you. Stick around to the end of each section you're arguing for so you know exactly what it is that we're discussing. This video was made to celebrate my ascent to 1000 subs because it was inspired by the many posts and arguments I've had with you guys over the 2 months I've started this channel, as well as some of your own misconceptions that I was given. So in essence, this is going to be our common misconceptions video. But without any further delay, let's get into it and see some of the common misconceptions that One Piece fans have. One thing that I didn't realize before that was recommended to me from the post I made earlier that I didn't think about previously was that Luffy doesn't have any special weakness against slashing attacks. Most of the community believes that Luffy has a weakness to slashing attacks the same way that Crocodile has a weakness to water or Enel has a weakness to rubber, but it simply isn't true. Luffy isn't directly weak to sword attacks, it's just that he has less invulnerability to sword attacks. A sword slash would damage Luffy the same whether he had his Devil Fruit or not, while a blunt force attack would damage Luffy less with his Devil Fruit because he's rubber. I'm sure you guys can already tell based on the track record of the channel that most of the misconceptions I see in the story are about Kaido, and this isn't simply because I don't believe Kaido is as strong as the community think he is, but because these misconceptions about Kaido are why exactly the community thinks he's way stronger than he actually is. A common phrase you'll hear people say when they try to cope with the fact that a near-death post-mortem Luffy was able to overpower Kaido is that Kaido was holding up an entire island. Kaido holding up Onigashima is never stated to be what tires him, but that his grip loosening on Onigashima is a result of him being tired. Kaido's flame clouds are a product of his Devil Fruit, and as with all Devil Fruit powers, they are directly tied to the user's consciousness and life. Kaido's flame clouds disappearing is what was causing Onigashima to fall. Kaido was not feeling the entire weight of Onigashima the entire time he was lifting it. And that's just silly to believe. If you're going to act like that, then don't switch up when Momo does the exact same thing to land Onigashima. The clouds being produced aren't a direct stamina drain as long as they're active, the same way Sugar keeping all the people on Dressrosa as toys isn't a stamina drain when the ability is active, but Sugar becoming unconscious causes the ability to revert. If it was a stamina drain, then Kaido and Momonosuke would be draining their stamina every time they're flying because they use their clouds to fly. Moving on from Wano, a misconception I see being perpetuated in the community more and more as the story goes on is that there are too many Conquerors Haki users. Whether or not it's a personal opinion is fine, but the notion that there are too many Conquerors Haki users is false for a multitude of reasons. The main one being that there are far more people living in the One Piece world than there are people with Conquerors Haki. Conquerors Haki is an ability stated to manifest in 1 in every several million people. Let's use the mid-range and say that's about 1 in every 5 million people. Marco says that you could count all the islands in the One Piece world and you wouldn't finish until you're past about 10 or 20 million, so let's assume that's just about 10 or so people per island. We currently have 24 confirmed Conquerors Haki users over the span of 40 years, and if we assume that one generation is born every 30 years and it's half the previous generation, then that would be about 15 people on, let's say, 10 million islands. This isn't a crazy highball either because it would be less people than were on Shellstown when it was initially founded. Shellstown being the island where Luffy meets Buggy. 15 people on 10 islands is about 150 million people on the entire planet. So if I extremely lowball the amount of people in the One Piece world, I'd still have about 5 more Conquerors Haki users than there are in the series right now, because 150 million divided by 5 is 30 million, and I'm adding Loki as a Conquerors Haki user even if he's not confirmed. But that's not accurate. Every island isn't inhabited, and maybe Marco is wildly exaggerating because after all, he's a kid. So let's use the real world as an example. One Piece would take place approximately in the 1500s simply based off the fact that there are pirates around. The estimated world population in our world during the time period would be about 610 to 620 million. The One Piece world could have a quarter of our population, and there would still be less Conquerors Haki users than there should be. Conquerors Haki only feels common because everyone at the top of the world has it, and we are now at the top of the world. But guess what? This is also stated to be what was going to happen. Rayleigh literally says that everyone who makes a name for themselves will almost certainly have Conquerors Haki. It's almost like stands in JoJo. Yes, they're rare, but for the story to be competitive, everyone you meet is going to have a stand power. No amount of Conquerors Haki users we receive in the story will be illogical in the context of the story. If it's a personal opinion, then yes, that's fine, but it's incorrect when the story already told you that this was going to happen. It's like saying that Oda letting Zoro beat Mihawk is going to be bad writing when we knew it was going to happen 4 years before it even happened. This is a misconception made by Kaido, but not one about him. The notion that Haki is by far greater than Devil Fruits is something that Kaido said in his battle with Gear 5, but this statement is contradicted numerous times in the story. Haki is not by far and away a better ability than having a Devil Fruit, but it is a more general and theoretically versatile ability. Someone with Haki, however, will only ever be viable with Haki if they're insanely strong previously, or if they train their Haki Haki their whole lives. Luffy learned Haki from Rayleigh, one of the best Haki masters out there, and still had his guard pierced by Horty Jones, but I guarantee you a random person could eat Jozu's diamond fruit and not have that same issue. Devil fruits are a more useful and versatile ability when trained, but the fact that devil fruits are random unless you know what it is you're eating does end up making them less desirable. Having Haki usage doesn't always make you stronger, but regardless of what devil fruit you get, you will be a stronger fighter for it, because devil fruits can always be used in a multitude of ways unique to the user. The same way one character uses the devil fruit will always be different from the way another character uses that, but every Haki user uses their ability in the exact same way. There's a reason why Luffy Awakening is what allowed him to beat Kaido and not his ACOG. There's a reason why Kizaru was able to compete with Gear 5 despite not having ACOG. There's a reason why Rocks wanted devil fruits to help him take over the world, and there's a reason why Imu's ability is highlighted more than his Haki. Devil fruits are the better power. You could give Roger the Chihuahua fruit and he would still be stronger than if he never had it. Haki requires you to already be strong for it to be a useful ability, because anyone strong enough to have Haki like Roger isn't going to be some fodder marine soldier if they couldn't use Haki. They'd still be a peak physical monster with the ability to replicate the 6 powers because of how powerful their physique is, while anyone can eat a devil fruit and become overpowered. Haki takes years and decades of training to become a useful ability, and even at that, you can still run out of Haki while you can't run out of devil fruit. One thing I hear about the Straw Hats is that they have no crew hierarchy, and that's a misconception mainly perpetuated to discount Zoro as the right-hand man of the Straw Hats. There doesn't need to be a crew hierarchy for Zoro to be considered the right-hand or vice captain role first off, because we see this with the red-haired pirates and the Roger pirates, but beyond that, the Straw Hats clearly have a hierarchy. Not in a literal I'm better than you sense, but the fact that there are clearly Straw Hats who have more responsibility and greater swing compared to others shows that there is a crew hierarchy. 9 times out of 10, the Straw Hats will listen to Sanji over Chopper, and 9 times out of 10, the Straw Hats will rely on Jinbei for protection and guidance and not Frankie. There being Straw Hats who are more important and respected in the crew than others doesn't negate the fact that each of the Straw Hats play a crucial role that the others can't play. There is no crew hierarchy in the Roger Pirates, but we can all tell that Rayleigh and Gabon have greater status and authority compared to someone like Peter Moo, and that Yasop and Beckman have greater authority on the red-haired pirates compared to Building, Snake, or Monster. Having a crew hierarchy doesn't mean being the Beast Pirates. You don't need to have titles for each crew member to group them to know that some have more responsibility placed on them than others. You know, it's crazy how many misconceptions were perpetuated from Wano, but I promise this is gonna be the last one for the video. Something I'll hear everyone tell me about Kaido is that Kaido's top 5 doesn't mean that these are characters that can beat him. Is it typically used to downplay Oden and Shanks for some reason, because people can't accept the fact that these two have a chance at defeating Kaido. Kaido's top 5 being misinterpreted is a test of a person's reading comprehension. If you don't believe it's characters who can beat Kaido, you're simply the kind of person that needs to have things spoon-fed to them for you to be able to understand it, and if you are able to understand it's the characters that can beat Kaido, you have an average logical reasoning. Kaido says to Luffy right after he attacks him and says he plans on defeating him, "How high will your ceiling go?" and in some translations, "Do you think you're as great as they are?" Kaido, after Luffy says he's going to defeat him, instantly compares him to these 5 characters, but let's go into it and see. Roger is someone who Kaido respects and implies is stronger than he is, as he literally says that Roger dominated the world while he was alive, and guess who was alive and an active pirate when Roger was alive? Xebec is someone who we literally see beat up young Kaido for jokes, and Xebec is also implied to be Roger's superior, and Kaido would never follow a person who he thinks is weaker than he is. The reason why Kaido joined the Rock Pirates is because Whitebeard asked him to, and Kaido is consistently shown to respect Whitebeard's strength, thus he would also respect Xebec's strength. Xebec is clearly somebody that's stronger than Kaido is currently, and Xebec is clearly somebody that Kaido would believe could defeat him. I also already sort of explained why Whitebeard would be on the list as well, but let me say it again for those who didn't hear. Whitebeard is somebody whose strength Kaido respects. Whitebeard is relative to Roger, and Whitebeard was the strongest man alive while Kaido was active and near his peak. Obviously, he's going to be stronger than Kaido and somebody who Kaido thinks could defeat him. Shanks is somebody who's implied to have been able to stop Kaido from going to Marineford, and Kaido literally left his base on Wano with his right-hand man and presumably would have flown all the way to Marineford since he took King with him, who's the only other beast pirate who can fly long distances. Shanks stops Kaido from going to Marineford despite the fact that Kaido put in all the effort to go there, and then mourns the death of Whitebeard 2 years later, showing that he really wanted to be there. Whitebeard was basically Kaido's big brother on the rocks if we consider Big Mom to be his big sister. The fact that Shanks was able to stop Kaido from going to Marineford shows that Kaido recognized that Shanks was somebody who he wasn't going to be able to defeat to get to the island and decided to turn back. Oden is somebody who's self-explanatory. Kaido has done everything but say out loud that Oden would have defeated him, and Kaido literally gets PTSD from feeling the aura of Oden's blade that scarred him, very clearly showing that Kaido recognizes that if Higurashi didn't step in to stop Oden, his battle with Oden would have been his last one. If these were characters who could simply fight Kaido, then Big Mom would also be on the list because she literally fights Kaido on Onigashima for an extended period of time before the war even happens. All these characters are implied heavily to be either stronger than Kaido or capable of defeating him, and the fact that Luffy, who wants to defeat him, is being compared to these characters characters also implies that this is what the panel is showing above clearly. Shanks' Haki being relative to Joyboy's is one of the newer ones, but is caused mainly due to a misinterpretation of a statement made by the Giants after feeling Joyboy's Haki, as well as something Joyboy says about the type of Haki that he put into the knot. When Joyboy said he's putting his strongest Haki into the knot that he gives Emeth, he's saying he's putting Conquerors Haki, his strongest type of Haki, not the maximum amount of his Haki. Conquerors Haki is the strongest type of Haki. If you disagree, then argue with Oda. Burley says that it's a quality that only the strongest possess. When Dory and Brogy compare Shanks' Conquerors Haki to Joyboy's, they're essentially implying that Joyboy's Haki is stronger than Shanks'. The fact that they ask, was that Haki greater than Red-Haired, and then says there was no hostility to it, is showing that Joyboy's Haki is greater than Shanks', as the Giants would have felt what Shanks' Haki feels like when it's hostile, because right before this, they would have watched Shanks body Kid with Kamusari. Conquerors Haki being used casually would be weaker than it is when it's being used offensively. The fact that there is no hostility in Joyboy's Haki at all, and it's being compared to Shanks' by people who have felt Shanks' Haki when being used in combat, is proof enough that Joyboy would have greater Haki than Shanks. Shanks doesn't need to be as strong as Joyboy to be strong. He's just not like that. Another thing I hear more and more in recent time is that Roger surpassed Xebec after God Valley. No, he didn't. The fact that Whitebeard is heavily implied to be stronger than Roger and is at bare minimum relative to him, and that Garp is so equal to him that they've nearly killed each other numerous times, is proof that Roger never surpassed Xebec, because Xebec is stated by Oda himself to be Roger's strongest adversary, not greatest, not most dangerous, strongest. And this is in the Road to Laugh-Tale volumes for everybody that thinks I'm talking about Sengoku. No, I'm not talking about Sengoku. I'm talking about the Road to Laugh-Tale volumes, which are written by Oda during the 1 month break that we got after Luffy defeated Kaido. The thought that Roger would have magically gotten way stronger between God Valley and later on in his life, when he was a year away from being 40 years old in God Valley and had advanced Conquerors Haki, is kinda stupid in my opinion. Xebec is stronger than Roger, they are not equals right now, and Xebec is stronger than Primebeard, Garp, and Roger at the peaks of their strength. Black Blades are something that a certain segment of the community misinterpret due to the contentious nature of the Mihawk and Shanks debate. Black Blades are never stated to mean that you're stronger than characters without that. Black Blades are simply a durability buff for the blade as far as we're currently aware. The creation of a Black Blade requires the swordsman to be strong, yes, but to say that creating a Black Blade is evidence that you're stronger than a swordsman without a Black Blade is false, because of the fact that creating a Black Blade does not automatically turn that blade into the highest grade. The grade of a blade is indirectly correlated with the strength of the user. While having a high grade blade does not necessarily mean that you are strong, people who are strong have high grade blades. There are many blades that are superior to Shisui that aren't Black Blades. A sword like Enma is considered to be on Shisui's level and will surpass it once it does become a Black Blade, and weapons like Ace and Murakumo Giri are superior to Shisui despite not being black. The strength correlation of a Black Blade is completely unknown as of right now, so thinking that those with Black Blades are all of a sudden on a different tier is false. This is one that you guys probably all believe, and I don't blame you, but it's not true based on what the story tells us, and that is that Koby would have never become anything without Garp. This is just false. Koby would have still been in the Navy without Garp. Koby may not have been sent to the Grand Line as early as he was, but Koby would still definitely be able to get to the Grand Line relatively quickly even without Garp. Garp has not given Koby any special training that he couldn't replicate on his own. Koby's willpower is what made him this strong this fast. His determination to get better so that he can accomplish his dream is what continues to push him higher and higher. This is what was highlighted when he did Honesty Impact. It wasn't the fact that he was a student of Garp, it was the fact that despite being Garp's student, he still went the extra mile to get stronger, pushing himself past the limit because he knows he's weak. When someone works 10 times as hard, he works 100 times harder than they work. Koby without Garp would still shoot up through the ranks of the Navy and be their frontrunner. Garp would have never chosen a successor that is only great because he's around, because you cannot expect the future of the Navy to be solely reliant on the past of the Navy. For there to be a future of the Navy, the future has to be able to continue on without looking to the past for everything. People who think Koby would have been some Marine fodder and died in the East Blue if he never met Garp are just inherently Koby haters. Smoker, before ever becoming a Vice Admiral, was able to ask to be transferred to the Grand Line. Koby would be pressing as hard as he does now and have even more reason to be pressing harder to get to the Grand Line, since Luffy's his direct inspiration to get stronger, so the moment he hears that Luffy's tearing it up in the Grand Line, his next focus would be doing whatever it takes to get to the Grand Line and the New World. Koby does not need Garp. Garp never taught him anything that he wouldn't have been able to learn on his own, because a person who oversaw most of his training almost the entirety of the time would have been Bogard. There are also the regular instructors in the Navy who, although are not Garp, still train strong Navy people like Ujaku and Groose. Groose is being portrayed to be the rival to Koby in the new generation of the Marines, so the fact that he was trained by these instructors proves that Koby would have been able to reach decently high up in the Navy with just those instructors. There are a multitude of ways for Koby to get where he's at in the Navy in a similar time period without Garp, and we need to start respecting his drive and ambition that is just as great as that of Luffy and Zoro. It's something you don't hear as much, but it's something that I do want to make clear because of a Xebec theory I made previously. Once upon a time, I said the two fruits that Rocks was looking for were the Goro Goro no Mi and the Nika fruit. I said this because the Goro Goro no Mi is the strongest Logia and the Nika would theoretically be the strongest Zoan. Everyone tried to cook me saying that the Goro isn't the strongest Logia and something like the Pika is stronger, but No, it's not, because the Goro no Mi is stated to be the strongest Logia in Skypiea, and the statement that the Goro is the strongest Logia is made for the audience specifically because no other character was around when the statement was made, and it has not been directly retconned in the future of the story either. I'm not gonna get into semantics about the fact that Rocky is the one who said this, because if you're gonna tell me, well, how does she know that? Well, how does she know what a Logia is in the first place since she grew up in the sky? The Goro no Mi being the strongest Logia is evidenced by the usage of the Devil Fruit, the ability to manipulate the weather, grant immense speed, and the ability to grant near omnipotence in a very wide range, by the way, when combined with basic observation Haki. People will tell me the Pika Pika is stronger, but no, it's actually not, because the downside of the Pika Pika is a massive one, and it's that you can only move in a straight line when using it. Sure, it seems great when Kizaru, an admiral with incredible observation Haki, is the one using it, but that fruit is constantly shown to hold him back due to the fact that you have a charge up time for movement. In the instant that you're going to move, the Goro is better for speed, but when you actually start moving, the Pika is better for one-way travel speed, but unless you're reflecting off glass, you're only able to move in one direction, and everyone knows which direction you're going to be going in. Enel's Logia is the strongest Logia, point blank period. With ancient technology being powered by Enel's Devil Fruit on the moon, and the sky and space becoming more and more important as the story of One Piece goes on, it's kind of obvious that the man who essentially powered his own personal ancient weapon would have the strongest Logia ability, especially since its natural enemy is literally the God Devil Fruit. Speaking of Enel, let's go into another misconception that people have about him as well as Kaido, which is that Luffy wouldn't have been able to beat the two without his Devil Fruit. This point was inspired by a poll I made, and a few of the responses I saw were that Luffy hard stops on Skypiea or Wano without his Devil Fruit. Something I'd like to say is that Luffy would have bloomed Haki much earlier into his journey if he didn't have his Devil Fruit, for the simple fact that Ace did. Luffy would have fought more Logias than Ace by the time he got Haki and would have been experiencing Haki on Skypiea through Monstra, so I guarantee that he would have bloomed it by the time he fought Enel if he didn't already have it after his fight with Crocodile. But let's ignore that because that's just my own headcanon. Rubber is not the only weakness that the Goro no Mi has. Gold is a counter as well. We see this when Luffy hits Enel with Golden Rifle and does damage to him with the gold ball and not rubber. Luffy also figured this out entirely on his own, so you can't even say that he wouldn't have realized that. Luffy would have found a way to use the gold on Skypiea to defeat Enel the same way he used water to defeat Crocodile. Enel has a spear on Skypiea, which is a similar weapon to the pipe staff that he grew up using, so you can't even say that he wouldn't be able to use it properly if you were able to take it from Enel. With Kaido, Luffy was only killed in that fight because CP0 was targeting him. CP0 only targeted him because the Gorosei asked Gornica to interfere with the fight because they were starting to connect the dots on Luffy having the Nika Devil Fruit. So Luffy, without that fruit, would have never been targeted by CP0 and would never have been killed the way he was on the rooftop. Luffy's Devil Fruit up until the point he went Gear 5 was never stated to be a reason why he was able to keep up with Kaido or ever shown to be the deciding factor in keeping him alive, but instead it was his Haki. If Luffy had been fighting up until that point without a Devil Fruit, his Haki would be way stronger way earlier, and his usage of it would be far more proficient than it is in the mainline story. It's crazy how Oda has given Luffy an out in every circumstance where you can argue his Devil Fruit is what keeps him alive, so no one can actually make the argument that Luffy's only gotten this far because he's Joyboy. If Luffy wasn't Joyboy, he would still be the grandson of a Haki monster and a man who rivaled the Pirate King, as well as the son of the world's worst criminal. Rayleigh would still train Luffy even if he never had his Devil Fruit because Luffy would still have the same dream that Roger had, and Shanks would have probably still inspired him even if he never ate the fruit because Luffy would still have the quality that allows him to be the most dangerous man on the sea, which is his personality. Luffy's Devil Fruit, while being very important, is not the thing that determines whether or not he would have gone to the top. Luffy without his Devil Fruit would still be in the exact same position he's in today, which is the best candidate for the title of the Pirate King. The One Piece community is a very interesting thing due to how long the story is and the fact that so many things get forgotten over the course of watching the series. Some of these aspects may be more contentious than others and be the cause for argument and debate, which is what I like about the community. Discussion is never simply just revolving around the main cast and what is going on currently, but around everything that goes on in the story, past, present, and future with all characters. This is what in my opinion makes the story the best one to read and why there will never be a community or a manga like One Piece again. This video was originally going to be about twice as long as it is right now, but I decided to cut out a lot of stuff because they're either arguments I've explained at length in my posts or stuff that I plan on tackling in future videos. Some of those things being Zoro vs Lucci as well as the Haki confusion. Thanks to all of you guys for allowing me to hit 1k and now 1.1k. This isn't my first time starting a YouTube channel, and when I had made one the first time, I had it for about 7 months before I stopped and it only ever hit 164 subs. The growth that this channel has had is insane to me and it keeps me motivated to keep putting out more and more content. I'm gonna try and get a Discord set up eventually, as now that this community has grown to a decent size and with the way that you guys are gonna be at my throat after this video and the future ones, it definitely warrants some voice chat debating. Expect bigger things coming up from this channel going forward because it's only upwards from here. If you stay to the end of the video, let me know what you think. Any of the misconceptions I stated that weren't actually misconceptions, any of my arguments that were based on a misconception itself, and what are some of the ones that I missed. If you enjoyed the video, drop a like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more high quality One Piece content. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.